What if I told you that the true potential of the Ferrari SF-25 is not at its speed, but in its most hidden defect? Lewis Hamilton has just discovered such a deep failure in the car that could be both his downfall and his salvation. Lewis Hamilton did not reach Ferrari as a star that changed colors. He did it with an emotional and sports load rarely seen in the history of Formula One. He was the 7-time champion who, after years of glory in Mercedes, had decided to abandon the comfort of the empire that helped build. His Brackley departure was not a simple move, it was a declaration of principles. He came to Maranello to close his career at the top, but also to rescue a Ferrari sunk in unfulfilled doubts and promises. However, what he found was a much more crude challenge than he imagined. From the first contact with the SF-25, something did not fit. It was not simply that the car was difficult to drive, but that it seemed to speak a completely different language from the one he had learned for more than a decade. Each aspect of the machine, from the power delivery, the braking, the response to the turn, to the way in which it generated aerodynamic load, was designed under a philosophy that collided frontally with its pilot instinct. It was as if they had given a tool designed for another type of pilot, with other reflexes, other sensitivity, and other expectations. The SF-25 was not a car to dominate. It was an enigma that had to decipher. During the first races, Hamilton was not the Hamilton that the world knew. He looked tense, uncomfortable, even slow in certain sections. The data showed a disconnection between what the car could give and what he was able to extract. The press began to murmur. Some said he had made a mistake, that the challenge had been great, that his time had already passed. But behind cameras, Lewis kept working. Not only on the track but also in the simulators with the engineers, studying the telemetries not only theirs, but of Leclerc, of previous seasons, of other Ferrari. His approach was not to replicate what he was doing in Mercedes, but completely reinvented. And this is where the act of humility and adaptability of Hamilton takes a historical dimension. Because while many champions demand that the car adapt to them, he decided to do the opposite. He knew that Ferrari could not and should not build a car just for him in his first year. So he began to modify his driving style. He adjusted his way of braking, lengthening the retention phase. He modified his entry line, prioritizing the minimum speed passage by curve instead of the traditional explosive exits that had perfected in Brackley. Even its accelerator management changed, dosing the power and traction phases more finely to compensate for the rear axle deficiencies. The learning curve was steep and painful. But Hamilton, unlike so many others who have failed in their attempt to revive Ferrari, did not give up. Instead of seeing the SF-25 as a disaster, it began to see it as an unknown with potential. And his adaptation process culminated on one of the most revealing weekends of the championship, the Monaco Grand Prix. It was in Monaco where everything exploded. A circuit that does not forgive, that nakes technical deficiencies with surgical precision. There, under the glamour of Monte Carlo, the Ferrari SF-25 stopped hiding his true face. The lack of performance in slow curves was not a simple matter of poorly executed tuning or strategy. It was a sign of a much deeper problem. And Hamilton, like a motor racing surgeon, soon isolate the symptoms. During free training, Ferrari engineers noticed something worrying. The car had an erratic behavior in each slow curve of the Monégasque layout. But Hamilton went further. He did not settle for the sensations from the cockpit. He gathered his team, reviewed data, compared Trovuelta telemetrias after return, and discovered a pattern that no one had detected with that clarity. The SF-25 suffered a serious structural instability on the rear axle under variable load conditions. And it was not a sporadic failure, but a design defect with implications throughout the aerodynamic philosophy of the car. While other cars distributed the aerodynamic load progressively and predictable along the chassis, the Ferrari concentrated it excessively in specific areas. In high-speed curves, this generated good general stability, but when entering slower sections such as Monaco Forks, the aerodynamic pressure point changed place, literally migrated halfway. The result? A car that entered one way and left another. Unpredictable, nervous, unstable. Exactly the opposite of what a pilot needs when you must risk every millimeter of track. But the diagnosis did not end there. When studying the tire data, Hamilton detected a phenomenon of even more worrying thermal asynchrony. The rear axle quickly reached the optimal temperature window, while the striker remained cold, out of operational range. This not only affected the balance of the car in the first laps, but it compromised the general behavior of the tires. When they tried to push in classification or during the first running laps, the SF-25 overheated the rear rubber before the fronts even offered adhesion. The result was graining, extreme subwiring at curve entrance and survival at exit. a car divided into two incompatible halves. The most plausible explanation for this distortion was in the structural changes implemented with respect to SF-24. Ferrari tried to redesign his philosophy to achieve greater efficiency in straight and fast curves, but in doing so, they sacrificed the synergy between axes. And it was that same redesign that introduced the problem of the rear axle that, ironically, only a pilot with the experience and sensitivity of Hamilton was able to identify in record time. And this is where the situation becomes more fascinating. Because Hamilton himself, after understanding the complexity of the failure, realized something that few would have imagined. This problem, if controlled, can become an advantage. The instability that ruins the plot in slow curves is transformed into dynamic flexibility into rapid curves. The car can change direction with unusual agility if the conditions are adequate. It is a defect, with potential. The most surprising thing about this story is not the defect itself, but what Hamilton has done with him. While other teams would have sunk in despair, while other pilots would have demanded immediate solutions, he chose the most difficult path. To understand. To transform chaos into control. Because sometimes, in Formula One, the great victories do not begin with a pole position, but with the exact moment you manage to thoroughly understand the monster you drive. The key was in a conceptual turn. Instead of continuing to watch the SF-25 as a defective car, Hamilton began to treat it as an extreme configuration car. In the background, it was not a broken machine. It was a specialized machine. The type of car that, if you take it to a circuit that requires high-speed precision, can perform with surprising stability. Suzuka, Silverstone, Spa, traced where the high-load aerodynamic balance and rapid curves dominate the landscape. Right there, the SF-25 could go from being a problem to a solution. Hamilton, with his experience, understood that not all cars have to be balanced on each track. Some have undeniable weak points, but also unique strengths that can be exploited if they develop with a clear vision. Thus, a new working hypothesis was born in Ferrari, not trying to fix everything but maximizing what it works. This philosophy was adopted by the technical team, which is now concentrated in adapting the car to the circuits where its aerodynamic characteristics are more effective, without fighting in vain against its structural DNA. The internal conversation in Maranello changed radically. It was no longer about finding solutions for Monaco or Singapore, where the car will continue to suffer, but to prepare a modular strategy. Two different configurations of SF-25. One more rigid and reactive for fast clues, and another more docile although limited for urban paths. In essence, Ferrari has begun to treat his car as if he had a double personality. And best of all, this adaptation is not imposed by the team from the garage, but directed from the steering wheel by Hamilton, who has become the point of union between engineering and performance. The effect on team dynamics has been remarkable. Engineers now listen more attentionally, simulators work with new parameters, and Charles Leclerc, until recently Ferrari's dominant face, has also begun to benefit from the technical discoveries of his new partner. It is as if Hamilton had not only come to drive the Ferrari, but to teach the car itself to behave otherwise. To convert their failures into tools, their cracks into escape roads, their instability into a strategic advantage. And so, a crisis that seemed to overflow the red team has become a new narrative. A narrative that is yet to be written completely, but already has a clear protagonist. Because if there is something that has demonstrated this process, it is that Lewis Hamilton did not come to Ferrari to close his career. He came to build something that very few have achieved in the modern history of Formula One, to give winning identity to an imperfect machine. And in the heart of that transformation, there are no secrets, only knowledge, intuition, and courage. The story of Ferrari SF-25 and Lewis Hamilton in this seasonal start is not simply another anecdote in the endless archive of Maranello technical problems. It is, in reality, a masterclass of how the future of a large team is written from the shadows, from the imperfections, from the discomfort of the unknown. Because the real championship does not always play on Sundays at 3 p.m. Many times it is defined in the silent garages in the morning, between telemetry leaves and impossible decisions. What Hamilton has done so far cannot be measured only in points or grille positions. It is measured in the direction, in purpose, in the way in which it has begun to alter the way Ferrari understands itself. He has exposed that performance is not a static engineering product, but an ongoing conversation between the pilot and the machine. It has shown that even structural errors can be read as messages, such as maps towards hidden performance that only the best know how to decipher. But this is just the beginning. The season is long, and the calendar is full of circuits where the truth of the SF-25 will be tested again. Some will expose it. Others will enhance it. The only thing that is clear is that now the team has a compass. And that compass is called Lewis Hamilton. Is it enough to reach McLaren, who has been stronger in integral performance? Can Ferrari win consistency before it's too late? And how will Red Bull and Mercedes react if Maranello manages to stabilize the monster he has in hand? I leave a questions to you. Do you think Ferrari can tame SF-25 before European summer? Or are we seeing a repetition of the ghosts of the past with a new protagonist?